under the tree of memories. The sun began to hide behind the hills when Elena arrived at the old tree of her childhood, the one that had witnessed so many promises and laughter. There, under its shadow, Nicolás was sitting, with the same nostalgic look that he remembered. 10 years had passed since the last time they saw each other, when their lives took different paths. Elena had I go to the city pursuing his dream of becoming a journalist, while Nicolás stayed in the small town to take care of his family. Despite the distance, the tree of memories remained being the point where it all began. Elena approached slowly, not knowing what to say. Nicolás looked up, and a sad smile appeared on his face. "Hello, Elena," he said in a soft tone. "Hola, Nicolás," she responded, feeling the memories hitting her hard. Both remained silent for a moment, listening to the whisper of the wind between the leaves. Finally, Elena spoke. "I thought you wouldn't come." Nicolás let out a sigh. "I couldn't miss it. After all, this tree holds too many of our stories." Elena nodded. When they were teenagers, the tree had been their refuge. There they hid from the world, shared their dreams and carved small initials into the bark, as if that could stop time. "Do you remember when we promised that would we always be together?" she asked, with a mixture of melancholy and guilt in her voice. "Of course I remember." Nicolás looked down, caressing one of the tree roots with his fingers. Life doesn't always meet what one plans, right?" Elena felt a lump in her throat. She had loved Nicolás with all her heart, but she had also felt that his world was too small. "No. I needed to explore, grow, and that meant leaving him behind." "I didn't want to leave," she said, finally facing the truth, "but I felt I had no choice." "And I didn't want you to stay alone because of yes," Nicolás responded with a firmer tone. "I knew you needed to fly, even though it hurt to see you leave." Elena looked at him, seeing on his face the traces of the years that had passed. He was no longer the young man. He was carefree, but there was something in his eyes that remained the same, a warmth that made her feel at home. "I always thought of you," she admitted, breaking the silence that weighed upon Lowe's. "Each achievement, each important moment. I always wondered if you would be proud of me." Nicolás smiled bitterly. "Of course I am proud, Elena. But I also wondered sometimes if you ever thought about returning." The question hung in the air, and Elena felt her heart shrink. Of course she had thought about returning, but she always found excuses. The work, Joe, the responsibilities, the fear of facing what he had left behind. "I did it," he confessed, with tears in his eyes. "Many times. But I was afraid that you would no longer want to see me." "Nicolás neg." He nodded his head, and his voice filled with a tenderness that disarmed her. "I would never have stopped wanting to see you, Elena. Never." Elena fell beside him, leaning her back against the tree. They remained, in silence, letting the past envelop them. "Why did you ask me to come today?" she finally asked. Nicolás took a breath, as if the words weighed on him. "My mother sold the house, Elena. I will leave town in a few weeks." Elena looked at him in surprise, feeling a pang in her chest. Nicolás had always been the soul of the place. She couldn't imagine him far from there. "Where to, Oz?" he whispered. "I don't know," he replied, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "But I thought that, before leaving, I needed to see you. To close this chapter of my life." Elena couldn't hold back the tears. "I'm sorry. I can't translate that. The input text is in Spanish, not Chinese." He built around his heart. "I don't want to lose you again, Nicolás." He looked at her, surprised by the sincerity in her voice. For a moment, time seemed to stop. Then, Nicolás took her mano with softness. "Elena, I have waited so long for these words. But I cannot stay here forever, waiting for you to decide if there is still a we." "And if I tell you yes?" she asked, with desperation in his voice. "Do I want to try? Do I not want this to be the end?" Nicolás did not respond immediately. He looked at the tree as if searching for answers in its branches. Finally he spoke. "If you say yes, Elena, I will stay. But this time, I need to know that it's real, that you won't leave again." Elena nodded, feeling her heart beat strongly. "It's real, Nicolás, always as I do." Both looked at each other, and in that look they found everything that words could not express. Under the tree of memories, they realized that, despite time and distance, their love he was still as strong as ever. That night, while the wind whispered among the leaves, they made a new promise. This time they would not let anything separate them. End.